Good jobs, such as those in the auto industry, have helped power the Ontario economy for decades. So when General Motors announced it would shut down its plant in Oshawa at a cost of more than 2,500 direct jobs, governments at all levels face tough questions about what might be done. Here with the Ontario government's view, here's Todd Smith, Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. He's also the government House Leader and the PC member for the Bay of Quinte, and we're happy to have you back in that chair.
Great to be here, Steve.
I do want to just start a little bit off the path here because your being in that job is a relatively new thing. 6 months and 26 days since you got sworn into another portfolio, which you then left and got shuffled into the current one you have after Jim Wilson's unexpected resignation. What is the biggest difficulty you have in a job which is really front and center right now?
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. I mean, it's the biggest part of our mandate, right? Making Ontario open for business, restoring Ontario's competitiveness on the world stage. I guess probably one of the most challenging things is splitting my time between my ministry duties, and there's 4 ministries now into one there, economic development, and you've got international trade and interprovincial trade in there, as well as red tape reduction, which is a huge part of what we're doing, and even part of citizenship and immigration and research and innovation are in there. So
sounds like it's too much for one guy.
It's a big ministry, and then you throw the House Leader stuff on top of that. So,
exactly.
And as you know, the House was sitting pretty much from the 1st of July until Christmas time. So it's been a challenge, but it's been really enjoyable, and it's been a lot of fun to get out there and see businesses and hear directly from them as to how we can help them.
Well, you get this new job, and then literally, was it a month later, GM announces its shutdown?
Yeah.
And you are suddenly, all eyes on you as to what you're going to be able to do to try to either save that factory or figure out something else. At the end of the day, what's on that list of yours for trying to achieve those two things, or one of those two things?
Yeah, it was about a week after getting the job, actually.
A week,
so
okay.
Welcome to the new job. We're losing allocation in Oshawa. And so, I mean, we had been advised that this was a possibility, that this could be coming. I don't think anybody expected that it would happen on that November day when we received the word. Certainly, we're working with General Motors. We're working with Unifor. We're working with the community, and we're working with the employees. The first thing that we did was put our training colleges and university team into action. What we need Unifor to do is start to allow those employees to get in line for retraining. But we want to continue to work with General Motors to ensure that they continue to invest in Oshawa and continue to invest in Ontario, which they are keen on doing. I mean, there's a lot of great things aside from not allocating vehicles, which isn't so great in Oshawa, but there are a lot of investments that GM is making in Ontario, particularly in Markham at the Research and Development Centre, but also the OnStar facility in Oshawa, Ingersoll over in the London-Oxford area, the big CAMI plant there producing Equinox vehicles, the engine plant in St. Catharines. So all is not lost on the General Motors front in Ontario.
But Oshawa is dead.
Well, parts of Oshawa, it seems at least the allocation of vehicles for Oshawa won't be continuing after the end of this year.
You were at the Detroit Auto Show with Premier Ford, and we've got a little picture we can put up here to show the two of you in your beautiful brown shoes.
Yes, exactly. We don't shop together.
Okay.
Just for cars, apparently.
That's a Dodge Challenger, apparently. That's a very attractive muscle car.
Produced in Brampton.
I'm not sure. Well, that was going to be my next question, because there are rumors about what's going to happen to those Brampton auto manufacturing facilities. What are you hearing?
Well, and what we want to ensure is that we don't have another Oshawa, right? So that's why immediately after the Oshawa news broke, we reached out to General Motors, of course, and talked with General Motors, but we also talked with the other 5 manufacturers, or the other 4 manufacturers that are currently building cars in Ontario, including FCA, Fiat Chrysler, which operates the Brampton facility and facilities down in Windsor as well. We drove to Windsor and met with some of their global leadership and talked about how we can ensure that that doesn't happen to Brampton or doesn't happen to Windsor.
Do you get any indications that they are thinking of downsizing as well?
No, they're committed to the allocation that they have right now. They're building big, beautiful cars in Brampton, the Challenger, and a couple of other vehicles as well. They're building the hybrid Pacifica vehicles down in Windsor. They're committed to Canada, and they're committed to Ontario. So they also want to work with us to ensure that we're creating that environment where they can continue to be successful and be competitive. And that's why we're so focused on working with the automakers on reducing red tape, because we can actually make a difference for them by making them more competitive, by eliminating some of those duplicative regulations that are in place and harmonizing where we can with the federal government.
Well, I see the Canadian Federation of Independent Business just gave you a pretty good mark on cutting down red tape.
That's right, yes. The highest mark that Ontario has ever got, an A- in their annual report card. And just today, the Premier was receiving the golden scissors for our commitment to reducing red tape, to ensure that we have, good businesses in Ontario creating good jobs going forward.
Having said that, I think Ontario is the only subnational jurisdiction in the world that has 5 of the leading automakers in the world all here. So does that open a door for you? I don't know what your pitch is, but do you go to the other auto manufacturers and say, look, we've got these 5 here already. You ought to be here too. What can we do to get you here?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we were doing in Detroit. Both the Premier and I had some meetings with companies who aren't currently operating in Ontario. Of course, we met with the 5 who are, so we can understand what they need from us to help make them more competitive here, because they're getting a lot of pressure from their headquarters, wherever it might be, in Japan or Detroit or wherever it is in the world. So we're very, very focused on ensuring that Ontario remains competitive, but also sending the message to those who aren't currently building in Ontario that we have a great supply chain that already exists here, because we have those 5 OEMs, those manufacturers who are already producing cars in Ontario, over 2 million cars a year, and we've got a great track record of building cars because of that supply chain, because of the talent that exists in Ontario. But we have a lot of other challenges ahead of us as well.
Anything you can share with us about other companies that might be thinking of coming here?
There are other companies that are looking at Ontario, and the General Motors news, while it's devastating for those in Oshawa right now, may lead to opportunities down the road, but I can't tell you much more than that. But we have been in contact with other manufacturers and big companies like Magna, which of course is an international company, and they're building new cars, but they're building cars on a contract basis in Europe right now. So at the auto show, they unveiled the new Toyota Supra, which is actually being built by Magna International. So yeah, there is the opportunity maybe, and there has been some speculation that perhaps we could get some investment from some of those other companies, because of the new USMCA, might have to have a toehold in North America to avoid some of the tariffs that might be out there.
Were you at the Premier's speech at the Economic Club earlier this week?
I wasn't, no. I was somewhere else doing something.
I'm not surprised.
The Lord's work.
Let me play a clip of some of what he had to say, because you may have heard that he made some news with that speech.
Yeah.
Shall we? Mr. Director, if you would.
I'm here today to ring the warning bell that the risk of a carbon tax recession is very, very real. You can be for a carbon tax, or you can be for manufacturing jobs. But you can't be for both. Our government will always stand up focused on the things that matter, like helping young people have access to skills they need to build their career, like reducing the red tape and the regulations, making hydro more affordable, and putting in place a real plan that ensures Ontario manufacturers, including the auto sector, continue to grow and continue to thrive in our province.
There is virtually unanimous agreement that the first thing the Premier said there about not being for a carbon tax and for manufacturing, you can't be for a carbon tax and for a strong economy, is just plain wrong. So why did he say it?
That's what we're hearing. That's what we're hearing,
Who are you hearing
loud
it from?
and clear. From industry, from manufacturers. They're telling us they're very, very pleased that we stepped away and got out of the expensive cap and trade program, which was a job killer in Ontario. When you couple that with all of the other things that the Premier was mentioning, the high electricity rates that are still in place, we are going to do something about those electricity rates. But as you know, I think I've been on this show talking to you in the past about the cost of electricity in Ontario. It's not an easy nut to crack. The skills development, we need to work on that. We need to ensure that labor rules are friendly. Otherwise, we're going to lose these manufacturers to other jurisdictions.
but
Everything that the Premier mentioned in that speech was exactly what we heard at the auto show.
Well, except that the Conference Board of Canada, which did the study that the Premier's staff cited, said at no point in our research paper do we say that the carbon tax could cause a recession. We specifically described the overall economic impact as small. So again, why is he saying things and attributing them to people who deny, in fact, that that's what they're saying?
Well, I think anytime you increase the cost to business, then you're increasing the cost to those who purchase goods.
But
I mean, that's
ushering in
where
a
it ends
recession?
up.
He said ushering in a recession.
Well, certainly it is going to make life more expensive for the people of Ontario. It's going to make life more expensive for everyday people. It's also going to make life more expensive for those who are manufacturing and doing business in Ontario. Those costs are going to be passed down to everyday Ontarians. So, what we need right now isn't more tax. We don't need more cost to business. We don't need more cost to the people of Ontario, especially when those other parts of business are still so high.
Okay, maybe I'm small-minded here, but I am looking for consistency. And one of the things, you appointed Gordon Campbell, the former British Columbia Premier, to do a line-by-line look at the books of the previous government and find out what the spending habits were. And he came forward and he basically told you guys what you wanted to hear, that he didn't like the spending habits of the previous government. Having said that, he was the British Columbia Premier who brought in a carbon tax. British Columbia has led the Canadian provincial scene in terms of a strong economy, in terms of low unemployment. So again, why is the Premier making comments that seem to go against what so many other people say, including the person whom he gave the job to look at the books of the province of Ontario?
I would say probably because the other fundamental parts of doing business in British Columbia are in better shape than they are here in Ontario. I mean, when we talk about Ontario as a low-cost environment, nobody in business here agrees because they're doing business in maybe BC, or they're doing it in across the border in Michigan or Ohio or the southern states where the cost of doing business and being competitive is far less than it is here. So if we're competing for auto jobs in Oshawa against Tennessee, there is no way that right now we can compete because of all of those other cost input factors that Ontario is facing. So,
are you sure the Economic Development Minister wants to be saying out loud, there's no way we can compete with Tennessee right now?
We've got a lot of work to do. That's why we've got Bill 66, the Restoring Ontario's Competitiveness Act, before the legislature. That's why we took steps very early on with Bill 47, making Ontario open for business. I mean, those are all steps, and they're great steps, and there has been a huge sigh of relief, I think, from the manufacturing community because of those steps that we have taken. There's still a lot of work to do.
Okay, again, maybe I'm silly to look for consistency, but Ontario's open for business. We want businesses to thrive here. We want to create an environment where businesses can thrive here. And one of the first things you did was cancel hundreds of green energy contracts that had been signed by the government of Ontario to provide services to various communities. How does that give the impression that we're not some kind of banana republic when we just start ripping up contracts willy-nilly?
The biggest thing that we were hearing from industry, be it the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers or the Canadian Manufacturers Association, all those groups were CME. They were telling us that it was the high cost of electricity that was the biggest factor that they were facing. I think it was probably the biggest reason why the Liberals are on the sidelines right now with 7 seats in the legislature, because of what they did to the electricity sector. So what we had to do was stop digging that hole deeper and increasing the cost of electricity. In those projects that we canceled, the 759 of them, is going to reduce future costs of $800 million in the system. So we couldn't continue to add to the problem. We had to stop, and then we have to try and deal with the mess that's been made in the electricity sector, which is massive, and it's not an easy nut to crack, as I mentioned earlier.
Former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, John Manley, now head of the Business Council of Canada, urged you to reconsider this. Said it doesn't look good in terms of giving the impression that Ontario is open for business. Will you reconsider any of those decisions?
No, skyrocketing electricity rates are probably the biggest thing discouraging businesses from coming to Ontario right now. We weren't going to continue to add to the problem. I think those who are in the business community understand that. Certainly those who are manufacturing right now know that when they look at their bill every month, and we heard this from the manufacturers when we were down in Detroit last week, if Ford Canada in Oakville or Windsor, when they get their bill and they look at their electricity cost inputs and the global adjustment, and all, those are things that they don't have to pay in other jurisdictions. So, when the Liberals changed the way that the electricity system ran by bringing in the Green Energy Act with hugely subsidized renewable energy projects that were unreliable for business. I mean, you can't have wind and solar powering manufacturing. You just can't do it. It's unreliable. This is a huge cost to business, and it was the biggest thing that we heard from manufacturers right across Ontario.
Just a quick follow-up on that. The very controversial means by which the previous government subsidized the cost of electricity in order to reduce it. You've left that in place, and you've also said you're going to further reduce electricity prices by 12%. When can we look forward to seeing your plan on that?
Yeah, so I mean, we started by canceling those expensive electricity projects that were going to continue to create chaos on the grid and drive up costs in the future. We're working on a plan right now that is going to provide a more reliable, predictable rate for industry.
When are we going to see it?
Well, I mean, we're only 6 months in, Steve. We've been doing an awful lot, as
Yes,
you know,
have.
and I know
Yes,
that the
you have.
Minister of Energy is working on his electricity plan right now.
Let's talk retraining. Retraining is a huge issue, obviously, for the people in Oshawa and beyond. And let's just read this graphic if we can. We got a couple of things to read here. This from the Toronto Star. The amount of money spent through the retraining program deployed by the Ontario government to assist 2,500 at-risk General Motors workers has declined dramatically over the past decade, from more than $18 million to just $1 million last year for the entire province. And let's follow up with this. This is from Vivek Goel, who's the VP of Research and Innovation at U of T. In Denmark, a program called Flexicurity helps laid-off workers by giving them up to 2 years of retraining. In Singapore, the government launched Skills Future in 2016, incentives to encourage people to upgrade their skills and acquire knowledge to stay competitive in emerging fields, including advanced manufacturing, data analytics, and cybersecurity. These are two other jurisdictions which look like they're doing way more than we are in order to help the targeted group in question. What are we doing?
Well, I had a conversation about this very issue with Ray Tanguay, who's known as the Auto Czar, as you know, made his career with Toyota and is responsible actually for bringing Toyota to Woodstock, Ontario. We were talking about skills and what we can do as the Ontario government to ensure that those who are currently working in the auto sector and those who are being eliminated, I guess, from the auto sector have an opportunity to land on their feet again. So I know that Marilee Fullerton, who's our Minister of Training, Colleges and University, is working on a plan right now, and I've been a part of that because it is a big part of economic development in Ontario is ensuring that we have that workforce of the future. So whether it's employees currently in manufacturing or those who are getting out of auto manufacturing, we want to create that ability for them to get the training that they need much quicker. So that's a look back at what Ontario maybe hasn't been doing. We've got a plan coming up that's going to deal with what we should be doing, and Mr. Tanguay has been a big part of that with us.
That plant's closing in 12 months. Are you committing here tonight that you will have something in place for those Oshawa workers before the year is out?
Yeah, I certainly hope that we can. I mean, obviously you're not going to get a four-year Bachelor of Arts degree, not that that's the best thing to get people into the skilled trades, but I mean, we've already taken steps to get people into the skilled trades, and that was part of Bill 47 by getting rid of the Ontario College of Trades and lowering the ratios so we can get more young people into those skilled trades to fill jobs. But specifically to the auto sector, I think the point that Mr. Tanguay makes is that it's important for people who are in the sector now because it is going to be evolving to autonomous vehicles and perhaps electric vehicles down the road or some other alternate fuel source, that they have the skills that they need to continue to be a part of the workforce at Toyota, Honda, Chrysler, Ford, General Motors, and whoever else may decide to locate in Ontario.
I mean, I guess part of your job is to give that 53-year-old guy who's worked on the line at GM for 20 years some hope that he's not done, right? That he has a future in something. Can you give him that hope today?
Yeah, so training colleges and universities is there right now. The ministry is there. The problem is that Unifor is still protesting on the lines in Oshawa. What we need is for them to realize that it doesn't seem like General Motors is going to give to allow us to start to work with those employees to ensure that they get the skills that they need. One of the lines actually closes 6 months from now in June of 2019. So, what we need is to be able to offer those programs that are in place that were mentioned on the screen, and then whatever new programs that we're able to start to deliver as a result of what Marilee Fullerton is doing at her ministry.
Okay, we got about a minute and a half to go here, so let me ask one last thing. If you had to pick one industry, leave tech aside. I know everybody's obsessed with tech, but leave that aside. One industry that you would expect to see a significant boom over the next few years in the province of Ontario, what have you got your finger on?
Tech.
Aside from tech, yes.
Obviously, we're committed to working with the auto sector, but there are so many. Agri-food is a huge opportunity for Ontario. We have so many successful agri-food businesses that are out there. They're actually number one when it comes to our economy right now, just ahead of the auto sector.
And you just put big dough into that plant in London that's going to be rebuilt.
Yeah, exactly. There are opportunities. Maple Leaf Foods, you're speaking of. There's a lot of opportunity in agri-food. But one of the biggest things that they're facing is strangling red tape as well. So, the former Premier, Kathleen Wynne, dropped the gauntlet, I guess, challenging that industry to grow, but at the same time was burying them in mounds of red tape. What we want to do is clear out that red tape so that they can be successful and create new jobs.
How about one last comment on Northern Ontario here? What can you point to as a potential path forward for some development or growth in Northern Ontario?
And Minister Rickford has been very busy on this.
And Greg Rickford.
And yeah, he is committed to getting that ring of fire open, as the Premier is. I mean, the previous government talked about it and talked about it and talked about it, but really nothing ever happened. We are committed to working with the resource sector up there, be it mining or forestry, and again, eliminating red tape to allow them to be successful and create good jobs for the North. And resource sharing for those communities in the North on those projects is so key, and I know that's what Minister Rickford is working on.
Let me say for the record, this is your second appearance on this program as a cabinet minister. We've asked numerous of your colleagues to come on. I shouldn't say none of them, few of them have been as brave as you so far. So if you could put a word with some of them that we're actually, a good place to talk if you want to get through to the people of Ontario, I'd be ever so grateful.
Listen, I'm happy to be back. I'm happy to be here. And all I can say is go Rams.
Go Rams?
Yeah.
Not go Pats?
No Pats. I can't side with you on that one, Steve.
Oh, well. Another thing we disagree on. That's Todd Smith. He's the Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. He's the Government House Leader for the Progressive Conservative Government and, of course, represents the Bay of Quinte in the Ontario Legislature. Thank you, Minister Smith.
My pleasure, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.